Judge, thank you for the comments you made. Please don't think that I copied the judge on some of my remarks, but I did work for him many years ago, so we tend to think alike. The judge talked about solutions, right, and about finding consensus. And economic development, the way I've defined it, just through my years in economic development, is it's a solutions-based approach to improving the economic well-being of a community, and the economic well-being and the quality of life of a community. When you think about everything that we're doing here today, it's essentially that, right? We want to improve the quality of life of the community. We want to create jobs. We want to create investments. And so as we try to accomplish those things, we find that sometimes it's not as easy as one would think. We all have different ideas. We all have different approaches. The approach and the goal is always the same, which is to make the region better. But the approach or the plan that we have is sometimes not always aligned. I'm going to talk to you all real quickly on my role as a TxDOT commissioner. I'm going to talk also about some of the things that I've learned. Now, these are all the roads under construction at TxDOT right now. These are not roads that are coming. These are not projects that are going to start. These are actual projects under construction today. And I'm sure if you're in the Dallas area, you would agree. If you're anywhere in the state, you would agree. TxDOT has over 80,000 lane miles in the state of Texas. California being second, Illinois being third. We have more lane miles than any other state in the country, obviously. TxDOT, if it were to be a civil engineering firm, we'd be the second largest civil engineering firm in the country. We've got 13,000 employees, so it's a big organization. But when you're a big organization, a lot of people are often intimidated by the size of the organization. And they feel that because we're so large, and we are in every part of the state, that sometimes it's hard to communicate with them, hard to get in the door. But I can tell you that it's not that hard. It really just requires us to set up a meeting, reach out to whether it's a commissioner or the district engineer, and they will welcome you with open arms. Because at the end of the day, we have to be aware of each other's projects. We really do. There's no way we could build a road assuming that the last conversation we had with a judge is the last time there was another project that came into the county. There's just no way. There's projects coming in every single day. And so that communication has to be constant, whether it's a city or the county or even school districts. School districts are growing every day. And sometimes, I can tell you as working for cities, it was very rare that I would go have a meeting with my superintendent to see what his plans were for the growth in his school district. We're all partners in this deal, but we sometimes forget that we need to communicate with each other. One of the things that I challenged myself when I got onto TxDOT, and I apologize if you've heard these stories, but I really do feel they're important to know. But I tend to look at everything from an economic development standpoint. That's just the way I was trained to think. I've been doing that for about 20 years. There's nothing that I do throughout my day that doesn't resonate or somehow doesn't connect to economic development. And so as I was touring the state, when the governor appointed me, I was the first person from the Rio Grande Valley. In fact, I was the first person from anywhere south of San Antonio to get appointed to TxDOT in over 30 years. And so that comes with a lot of pressure, because if you don't get another appointee from the south of San Antonio, you'll know that I didn't do a good job, and therefore, I ruined it for everybody else south of San Antonio. And so I didn't want the governor to think that I was here to take this, not so seriously. TxDOT is, the way I compare it to is very similar to a city council. We got 5 commissioners. We got the chairman, just like you would have a mayor. And then we have the authority to hire one person. That's the executive director. Just like a city council will hire a city manager. We've got 25 districts throughout the state. And so, we each have, that would be the equivalent to a department head, but instead they're district engineers. And so, I think about all the city councils that I've worked for, and I think about how some city council members got elected. They worked their butt off to get elected, and then once they got elected, they only showed up to the monthly meetings, right? But then you had those city council members that were at every single meeting. It didn't matter what part of town it was. It didn't matter where it was. They were at every meeting. And I felt that in order for me to get reappointed, I had to be at every single meeting. And so I challenged myself to visit all 25 districts within the first 365 days of being a commissioner. And I can tell you, I was able to do it. I did it in exactly 364 days. I went to all 25 districts in the state of Texas. And as you can see, the state is large. So, I mean, I literally went to every part of this state. You know, have you been to Childress, Texas? There's nothing in Childress, Texas, okay? You know, I mean, you know, have you been to Atlanta in Texas? It actually borders Arkansas, Louisiana. It's a city that borders 3 states. And so, you know, I would never know what those things are unless I went there. And the things that I learned from doing that tour was essentially this. The first thing that I was really happy to see when I got on TxDOT, again, trying to make everything connect to economic development, is that as I was looking at the state's budget, I noticed that transportation was under Article 7, which is economic development. So the state legislature looks at transportation as an economic development organization. It doesn't look at us as something like water, whose Article 7, which is natural resources, or rail. It looks at us just like workforce. We're an economic development entity, and the day that we stop growing is the day that the state starts, declining from its economy. The other thing I realized is that, you know, every district engineer has a different way of thinking. A lot of people often say, you know, the district engineer is the one limiting our projects. They're the ones that are causing the delay. And I can tell you, I used to blame a lot of things on TxDOT because it was easy to blame a massive organization. But now I blame everything on cities. And because I see how things are functioning now, right? But I can tell you that the district engineer that is in every region came up a different career path, just like I came up the economic development career path before I became city manager. Some folks came up the public safety route before they became city managers. And so naturally, they're going to think about public safety when they're managing a city, just like naturally I would think about economic development when I was managing a city. And so every district engineer thinks about the state in a different way. And so if you came up the career path of maintenance, they think about it from a maintenance perspective. You build a road, that means I got to maintain it, even though they're often measured by the number of roads that are under construction, not the number of roads that are being maintained. But if that's the career path that you came up, then you're naturally going to think about maintenance. And so that was really interesting to me. Managing growth versus controlling growth. I came across a lot of cities and a lot of mayors that would say, I ran on the notion that we were not going to issue one more permit in our community. The way it is today is the way we wanted to stay. Well, as we know, growth is, or development is like water. It chooses a path of least resistance, right? You stop issuing permits, they just go to the next town. I hate to say this, but companies don't care about communities. They really don't. They care about where can I capture the biggest share of the market. And if that happens to be your town, so be it. So it's up to us to make sure that we give them and we paint that picture to be able to show them that you can capture the biggest share of our market in our region. The judge mentioned that I would say something about incentives. And we had a conversation about recruiting automotive companies. You know, every city, every economic developer talks about recruiting an automotive company, right? That's what you want. Why? Because it brings the tier 1, the tier 2, and the tier 3 suppliers, which is they create a lot of jobs. Now, unfortunately, to recruit an automotive company today, the average incentive, upfront incentive, cash incentive is $90 million. That is the average. Now, over the period of 20 years, it ends up being a total of close to $500 million. Now, what city, what region, what county has $90 million today in their cash account, in their general fund, that they can just write a check, still operate the city the way they normally would, but be able to cut a check for $90 million? And you start to see those things, and you start realizing that, you know what, as much as we would like an automotive company, we can't get an automotive company. Yet, we spend a lot of time traveling to conferences and attending all these meetings, still thinking that we could be that entity to recruit that automotive company. I hate to tell you, at the end of the day, it's not about the communities, it's about who can get me the biggest share of the market. Now, what we should do is go after the suppliers that they've been going at, or that like to be near them, which is what the Valley's always done. We've done a really good job in having suppliers. If you look at the density of suppliers that we have in the Rio Grande Valley, a lot of it has to do with electronics and medical device manufacturing, but it is one of these things that we've done very well. We need to continue building that density. If we build up that density, we'll be able to recruit the larger corporations like other cities are doing. One thing I also noticed touring the state, and then just I've been able to go to other conferences or attend other transportation type of meetings. And one of the things that I noticed from every city that we aspire to be, whether it's Chicago, whether it's San Diego, whether it's New York City or Dallas and Houston, there's three things that are always in common. And those three things are a strong regional presence of a university. And we've got that. We've got UTRGV. A strong presence of medical health care. And we have that now. We got hospitals in Brownsville, we got hospitals in Weslaco, we got hospitals in McAllen, Edinburgh. And then the last thing is a strong presence of government. And as the judge showed, I think the number 2 item there was government. We've got a strong presence of government. Now, again, it doesn't say a strong presence of automotive suppliers, right? It doesn't say a strong presence of technology companies like Google and IBM and all those companies that we would love to have because they pay high wages. The reality is those are our strengths, and we have to focus on the strengths. It's nice to aspire, it's nice to compare, but the reality is that those are our strengths, and we need to focus on those if we want to create density and we want to grow the region. And then the last thing I'll leave you all with this, and it's also something that the judge mentioned. So you see all these projects that are here in the state, and I can tell you the one thing that I saw often was these funding requests that we would get at TxDOT. Now, currently today, at TxDOT, we've got about $50 billion worth of projects going on right now. We just issued, last year we issued what's called our Unified Transportation Program, which is essentially a 10-year plan, very similar to a CIP if you work at cities. And that 10-year plan was about $140 billion. About 104 in construction, another close to 40 in maintenance. So the state of Texas is obviously growing. In comparison, right, we got 50 billion in contracts today. In comparison, California's got about 18 billion right now. The state of Virginia, I think their entire budget is much less than what we've got in constructions right now for the entire state of Virginia. So obviously, Texas is growing. But I'll leave with this. So funding requests come in all the time. And I found that finding the funding is easy. That is literally the easiest part of getting these projects done, is finding consensus. That is the most difficult part in getting these projects going. When you have lack of consensus, all you're doing is increasing the cost of the project. That's all you're doing. Lack of consensus will kill a project. And in fact, I'll mention this. I got invited, one of the cool things about being on the commission, and one of the cool things that once the word got out that I was willing to travel to every nook and cranny of the state of Texas, one day I get a call and it's Governor Abbott. And he says, hey, Alex, I need you to go to El Paso. And so I go to El Paso to talk about some projects. Next time he calls me, I need you to go to Midland. But one time he calls me and he says, I need you to go to this town. And I won't say the town. But I get there, and we had the senator, the state senator, we had the state rep, we had the county judge, we had the business community, the mayor, and the MPO director that was there. And they said, look, we need TxDOT to help us expand this interstate. It's what's creating a bottleneck in our community. It's what's limiting growth. It's what's affecting industry in our region. And so I started easily going down the line. I said, okay, Judge, what do you think? And he says, no, that's my number one priority. Representative, what do you think? That's my number one priority. Senator, number one priority. MPO, number one priority. Mayor, not my priority. And so what do I do then? Do I tell the mayor, look, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to listen to the senator. I'm going to listen to the state rep. Because we know that especially in towns that have term limits, that mayor is not going to retire from political office. He will one day run for higher office. And who knows, he may end up being the chair of transportation. And I would hate for him to to put us in a position to where he says, I remember you coming to my town and you voted against me essentially and sided with everybody else as opposed to siding with the mayor of that town. And that to me was interesting because the project was fully funded. It was fully funded, but he just did not want TxDOT in his community. He was worried about the phone calls that he's going to get because, as we know, projects, when you build a road, they take a very long time. You know, I was visiting with a person that started working at TxDOT in 1998 here in the Rio Grande Valley, and now is in Houston. And I ran into him, and he says, "Man, I'm so glad you guys did this ribbon cutting at the Rio Grande City, or out there, the relief route going towards Rio Grande City." And he says, "That was the first project I started on." And I asked him, "When did you start at TxDOT?" He says, 1998. Well, we just cut the ribbon like a year ago. You know, I mean, that's how long it takes. Now, I can assure you that through those years, there was a lack of consensus. And that led to this project being slower. And so I really do encourage you all, as we have these discussions, to keep that in mind. You know, put those you know, the opinions, the personalities aside, because it really is going to affect the growth of the region. And again, going back to the definition of economic development, it's a solutions-based approach. We have to focus on finding a solution, not putting obstacles in the way of keeping this region from growing. Thank you all so much.